The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the hosts and guests, and not necessarily those of the staff or management of Worldwide Digital Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you. Now, I appreciate it. Something else I'm getting tired of is all this stupid bullshit we have to listen to all the time about children. It's all you hear in this country. Children, help the children. What about the children? Save the children. You know what I say? Fuck the children. Fuck them. They're getting entirely too much attention. And I know what you're thinking. You say, Jesus, he's not going to attack children, is he? Yes, he is. He's going to attack children. And remember, this is Mr. Conductor talking. I know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm talking about. And I also know all you single dads and soccer moms who think you're such fucking heroes aren't going to like this, but somebody's got to tell you for your own good, your children are overrated and overvalued. You've turned them into little cult objects. You have a child fetish, and it's not healthy. And don't give me that weak shit. Well, I love my children. Fuck you. Everybody loves their children. Doesn't make you special. John Wayne Gacy loved his children. Kept them all right out in the yard near the garage. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is this constant mindless yammering in the media, this neurotic fixation that somehow everything has to be revolved around children. It's completely out of balance. Listen, there are a couple of things about kids you have to remember. First of all, they're not all cute, okay? In fact, if you look at them close, some of them are rather unpleasant looking. And a lot of them don't smell too good either. The little ones in particular seem to have a kind of urine and sour milk combination or something. Stay with me on this. The sooner you face it, the better off you're going to be. Second premise, not all children are smart and clever. Got that? Kids are like any other group of people. A few winners, a whole lot of losers. There are a lot of loser kids out there who simply aren't going anywhere. And you can't save them all. You can't save them all. You got to let them go. You got to cut them loose. You got to stop overprotecting them because you're making them too soft. Today's kids are way too soft. For one thing, there's too much emphasis on safety. Child-proof medicine bottles and fireproof pajamas, child restraints and car seats and helmets, bicycles, skateboard, baseball helmets. Kids have to wear helmets now for everything but jerking off. Grown-ups have taken all the fun out of being a kid just to save a few thousand lives. It's pathetic. It's pathetic. What's happening is, what's happening, you know what it is? These baby boomers, these soft, fruity baby boomers, are raising an entire generation of soft, fruity kids who aren't even allowed to have hazardous toys, for Christ's sakes. Hazardous toys. Shit, whatever happened to natural selection? Survival of the fittest. The kid who swallows too many marbles doesn't grow up to have kids of his own. Simple as that. Simple. Nature knows best. We're saving entirely too many lives in this country of all ages. Nature should be allowed to do its job of killing off the weak and sickly and ignorant people without interference from airbags and batting helmets. Just think of it as passive eugenics, okay? Now, here's another example of overprotection. Did you ever notice on the TV news, every time some guy with an AK-47 strolls onto a schoolyard and kills 3 or 4 kids and a couple of teachers, the next day, the school is overrun with counselors and psychiatrists and grief counselors and trauma therapists trying to help the children cope. Shit, when I was in school, someone came to our school and killed 3 or 4 of us. We went right on with our arithmetic. 35 classmates minus 4 equals 31. We were tough. I say if kids can handle the violence at home, they ought to be able to handle the violence in school. I'm not worried about guns in school. You know what I'm waiting for? Guns in church. That's going to be a lot of fun. And it'll happen. You watch. Some nut will go fucking ape shit in the church, and they'll refer to him as a disgruntled worshiper. Here's another bunch of ignorant shit. School uniforms. Bad theory. The idea that if kids wear uniforms to school, it helps keep order. Don't these schools do enough damage making all these kids think alike? Now they're going to get them to look alike, too? And it's not a new idea. I first saw it in old newsreels from the 1930s, but it was hard to understand because the narration was in German. One more. Thank you. Thank you. One more item about children, and that is this superstitious nonsense that blames tobacco companies for kids who smoke. Listen, kids don't smoke because a camel in sunglasses tells them to. They smoke for the same reasons adults do, because it relieves anxiety and depression. And you'd be anxious and depressed too if you had to put up with these pathetic, insecure, striving, anal, yuppie parents who enroll you in college before you're old enough to know which side of the playpen smells the worst. And then they fill you full of Ritalin and drag you all over town in search of meaningless structure. Little League, Cub Scouts, swimming, soccer, karate, piano, bagpipes, watercolors, witchcraft, glass blowing, and dildo practice. They even have play dates, for Christ's sakes. Playing is now done by appointment. Whatever happened to you show me your wee-wee and I'll show you mine? Hey, no wonder kids smoke. It helps. Not as much as weed, but hey, you can't have everything. You know it's true. Parents are burning these kids out on structure. I think every day all children should have 3 hours of daydreaming. Just daydreaming. You could use a little of it yourself, by the way. Just sit at the window, stare at the clouds. It's good for you. If you want to know how you can help your children, leave them the fuck alone.
Get yourselves together. Right. Stand up and live your life. Right. Get yourselves together. Right. Hands up high.
Hey! Welcome to the Rise Above Show. I am Joe Perroni.
And I'm Heidi Mancini. And I just wanted to take a moment to give our plug out to our sponsors for our show, our partners for the Rise Above Show. Meal Prep Vegas, their meal prep, Marie does the food, and their number is 702-624-9286. And they customize your food according to your, likes. You don't have to be a competitor. You can make your life easier by ordering your food pre-made so you can make better food choices. And also Jay Jung from City Athletic Club.
Perfect. Ready to start the show?
Yep.
This week, we want to do the show on this opioid epidemic that seems to be everywhere you look in the news. So what I did over the last couple of weeks, I've been going through YouTube and I've been watching so many documentaries. And I got to tell you, I'm up to like 20 documentaries so far. And they all annoy me and they get really boring after a while. And I'll tell you why. Because they're all the same. They keep saying the same things, and I don't think that they're getting to the root of the problem. And I think as soon as we start talking about the opioid epidemic, I think that's the start of the problem right there. Because again, we're blaming an inanimate object, we're blaming a drug, we're not blaming the society from where or why people need to use this drug. To go into politics just a little bit, Trump talks about building this wall. And one of the things about building the wall, he would say, is because we need to keep drugs out. One of them being heroin. But this is just straight capitalism, right? If somebody brings a product over the border, there's a massive supply. But what if there was no demand for it? I mean, you could stack this room with as much heroin and cocaine as you want. But in no way, shape, or form do I feel like I need that because it's not going to benefit my life. So what would happen is that all the drugs in the world would die of loneliness because I wouldn't care about them. So if you were a stable, functional person with meaning and purpose in your life, you would not have the need for heroin and these types of drugs. So that's my point. So when you see all this stuff about this opioid epidemic, is there? Or is it really just a pain problem? And I don't mean just physical pain. I mean, is it an emotional pain? Is it human beings that can't find purpose in their life? That's where I think the epidemic is. What do you think?
I agree with that statement. I think that, one of the things that you mentioned before, and I was going to try and crack a joke about it, was if we had a room full of heroin and drugs, I would probably become a dealer, because I'd be like, I could see the opportunity as an entrepreneur to make money. So, I wouldn't take the drugs myself, but I would be like, this could be a business, business opportunity to make money. But the real issue there is that, in the first place, you got to have people that want your product, people that are going to use it to be able to sell it. And we do live in a society that there's people out there that are going to want to do drugs and take drugs because they just don't want to cope, or they don't know how to cope. And to me, there's just so much going on now with all that. It's very, you talk about systematic or symptomatic, and it's the whole system breakdown. It's the whole from childbirth all the way through to, adulthood, and then from adulthood to, finding the right help that you need to get you through what you need to get through. Some people don't even think they have a problem. That's the other part of it.
That's true. I think it's because when you deal with drugs, let's say, 'cause that's the issue for today, the opioid epidemic. Most people that are supposedly addicted to drugs, they don't find that the drug is a problem. They think it's the solution to their life. I don't even like the word addiction. I would want to call it more like a compulsive, chronic comfort seeking. That's all it really is, because that's what they find in their life to give them a little bit of joy or numbness, which is better than the pain that they're feeling. One of the things when I worked at the drug and alcohol rehab, I would look at these guys, and I mean guys because it was an all-male facility. I would say, listen, if I was able to wipe out every single drug off the face of the planet, would your problem be solved? Not one of them said yes. Because the truth is that it's their life that's the problem. And then you have to get into the really hard discussions. Like, we can call this opioid epidemic a national emergency, whatever Trump called it. But the fact is, until we want to get down to the real hard parts, talking about the trauma, talking about why they can't relate to human beings, why they have so much pain, why they hate themselves. If we don't talk about any of that, all this other stuff is ridiculous. I don't care if heroin was wiped off the face of the planet, they would find something else. And even if you wiped off all the drugs, they would bang their head against walls. They would do whatever they could do. It's like there's a lot of people over the years, I don't know how many, but they've jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. We don't have a Golden Gate Bridge epidemic. We don't have a drowning epidemic. We don't have a water epidemic. We don't have a falling off a bridge epidemic. What we have is people who can't find a way to get their needs met. They're helpless, they feel hopeless, and that's the best option they think they have at the time. That's the epidemic here. It's the existential crisis, let's call it. But I just don't see it being a opioid problem.
Well, and existential, I would say it could be existential if you're older and you're going through parts of your life. But when you're a middle-aged kind of a person, you're in your 20s, and to me, there's no existential thing going on there. That's called, I choose to do drugs because I want to check out, because they don't really like their lives, because they don't know what they're supposed to be doing in the first place. But I think that there's a lot of, you and I talked about this earlier today. It's funny you sent me that George Carlin video, which I thought was funny. And one of the things one of my clients said to me, she goes, I find it funny as heck when you come out and you say something like, that sounds like harsh, like you're an uncaring person. And people that know me know I'm very caring, and I volunteer, I try to help out wherever I can. But there is a part of me that, and I told you this morning, that in nature has a way of, through attrition, it gets rid of the weak. And they usually will kill the runt. They'll get rid of it because they say you're not, when it comes to hunting and those type of things, they already know instinctively that this little guy isn't going to do them any good, so they kill it, because they're like, you're just going to weigh us down. And with all this drug, people can't be that stupid to know that doing drugs is stupid. Do you know what I mean?
Well,
It's
well,
like,
not to them. It serves a purpose.
but I understand that. But I also understand that I think in our whole society, though, there's a lot of everybody enables everybody.
Right.
All the way from everybody to the professionals to even people in your own life. Like most of us can't go up to somebody and say, I just had this conversation with somebody the other day. I said, I'm really worried about you, and I'm saying this very cautiously to you because I don't want to lose a friend over it. But I'm worried about your choices lately.
Right.
And the answer I got back was, whatever. And I said, okay, well, then I said to myself right then and there, as much as I love this person and they're part of my life, when I have to care more about where you're at and your choices and you don't really care right now, you're just kind of giving me the oh well, I decided to say, oh well, okay, oh well, we'll just see what happens.
Right. But I think, and we did talk about this before, and it's interesting because the way you sound is like my parents would have sounded, right? Which I like that. And I think that's how you raise healthy adults.
Okay, and I agree, and I would have to tell you, if you talk to my daughter Ava, she, and I've been criticized over the years for this by different people. I mean, I was helicoptering to her to a certain degree because she was my only child, so mine was, but I've always told her, you know what, you make choices. You chose to smoke weed, you chose to get drunk, you chose to put all those crazy tattoos all over your body that now she says I have to get covered because I don't like them, because when she was doing that she was a lot younger. And I said, these are all choices of yours. Your father didn't make you quit school. You chose to quit school. You chose to go live with your dad because you didn't want rules. These are all choices. So, oh well, it's the same thing with my choices. If I make bad choices or I decide that today I just don't feel like going to work today because I'm just don't feel like it, but I leave 5 of my clients hanging that wanted their hair done, or my training client that would meet me at 5 a.m., my consequence is going to be I have no money, no clients, no job. So we always have to make a choice with, thinking about what the outcome is going to be. How is this going to affect my life? How is it going to affect my performance?
But the interesting part to me is that, okay, so in the beginning, if you watch it, we played a 7-minute George Carlin video. It is absolutely one of the most funniest things you will ever hear. But he also predicts the shootings in churches. And as you go through it, you're like, oh my God, this guy, he called out helicopter parenting before we had the words helicopter parenting. He talked about how kids are way too soft. He talked about passive eugenics in terms of exactly what you were saying now, but you didn't even hear the video. So that's why I think it's even more interesting.
I was going to try to remember that word, passive eugenics, because, I do believe it's choice. And I would sit here and I would say to people, yes, I have tried drugs. I have smoked. I have drank. I have done all the stuff because I've had somebody say, well, you don't know because you've never done it. Okay, here's the thing. I'm fit right now. I'm healthy right now in the later part of my life. But when I was a young person, I had issues with, I never had a drug issue. But I experimented with different things that were out there, and I decided at a young age, by the time I was probably 17, I had tried drugs. I had been drunk off my ass that I don't remember what was going on. By the time I was 17, I was like, I'm kind of over it. Time to be normal. So I did make some choices.
Yeah, most people did. But go back to the video that we talked about maybe 6 weeks ago about being raised in the 1970s. These were strong individuals with strong parents, right? And so we were raised with values. So if you drink a little bit, do a little bit of weed, whatever you're doing, it was to enhance maybe a moment or to have a little bit of fun with your friends. Now it's not like that. We're dealing with an entitled culture. We're dealing with children without spines, without any direction in their life. So when they discover drugs, that's their life. That's where the difference is. One of the things I was thinking about this week is how we've even normalized marijuana. I'm not going to say that there's not some positive things about it, because there are, and studies will suggest and definitely show that. Where I have the problem with marijuana is that it actually, now stay with me on this, it causes osteoporosis of your emotional regulation system. If you're young and every time you have a feeling or a thought that's a little bit difficult, or you have anxiety, or you have a little depression and you need to smoke marijuana, you're causing yourself to have no resistance in your life, so you don't build anything up. So now you have a child that's growing up that is filled with anxiety all the time and has absolutely no immune system to be able to handle it. And that's what we're seeing now. One of the things about this so-called opioid epidemic, the interesting thing is that in truth, there is an explosion of opioids, whether we're talking prescription pills or we're talking just straight heroin. It's been an explosion of the use of that. But what we also are not talking about is the rise in amphetamine use. There's a rise in marijuana use. There's a rise in alcohol use. So what we're really looking at is an epidemic of human beings that cannot deal with anxiety. They can't deal with depression. They can't deal with anything emotional. And the more that we normalize doing marijuana every time you have a little bit of a feeling, it's like in Brave New World. Every time you get to a feeling, you got to take a soma. And that's what I'm seeing these days. And I see these walking zombies. They have no emotion anymore. It's much different than when you and I were young, when a friend or us, whoever, would do something to enhance our day. It doesn't run our day. What do you think?
No, I agree. I mean,
I know John wants to say something.
John wants to say something.
Challenge me.
I take the other side of it just because, I don't know. My daughter's done things. She's experimented. She's cleaning up her act. But she's also had, she's had professional people in her life that had enabled her and gave her prescriptions that she didn't need at a very young age. And, me fighting against, you're already a parent that doesn't know anything once your kid turns a certain age. And to have that fight, with another adult, and then to have that fight with an MD who's a doctor that obviously knows more than I do, he went to school, to say, why are you doing this to our children? Why are you prescribing these meds? Mm-hmm. You're enabling the problem, or you're part of the problem. They're not the problem, because it does come down to the person still making that choice. But when you're talking to somebody that's in pain, or you're talking to a child that is in whatever pain they're in, because of peer pressures and different things, and you give them mind-altering drugs. I mean, you're already, as a professional, you're giving them the coping is, take a pill, you'll feel better. Right. And so it starts with the professionals too, because the opioid use right now, most of the drugs out there are prescription, and people are getting prescriptions of 90 pills, 120 pills, and now they've gotten smart about it and they're selling them. Mm-hmm. A lot of older people that I know that have money problems right now because they're older, right. They get boatloads of drugs, and they have just. And honestly, I jokingly say to them, because they go, "What am I supposed to do with all these Loratabs, and what do I do with all this Tranadol? You're talking some major shit." And I said, "You know what? Not to be funny about it, you should sell it." I said, "You could supplement your income selling your drugs."
That's what Craigslist is for.
But and they just look at me, and I go, "But what are you doing? There's people out there that can't even get a medication because of their prescription meds. They can't get them because they can't afford them, and yet we have just street drugs out on the drugs that people are just selling $5 a pill, and yet people that really need it, some of the older people that don't have great health insurance, they can't even get a pill. But yet you got these losers on the street."
That's why the heroin use has gone up. It's because their prescription is running out. They can't get any more. It's expensive. And for $5, go down there and get yourself a hit of heroin, right? Which does the same thing.
True.
And what I was going to say earlier is you're talking about your negativity about cannabis or marijuana a little bit. So substitute that for ice cream, food, any of the things.
I agree.
And the of all of those things, the marijuana is the least harmful and the most beneficial to the human body.
Okay, I do agree with you. On my list, including all of the drugs that are being overused. And like you said, it's not just an opioid epidemic. It's every drug. It's alcohol. It's everything. That's the crazy thing when you start looking at the numbers. But also obesity. Food addiction is outrageous. So you're correct. That's true too. So again, that does kill people. Now we're talking cancer and heart disease. So that's a whole nother show, right? We're talking about porn addiction. And I mean that, not sex addiction. Because if you were actually addicted to sex, we would never leave the house, right? Because we would just masturbate all day, number one. Or if we have a girlfriend or a wife, we would just, it's like, listen, I'd love to go to work, but I need to make love to my wife one more time. So it's not sex addiction, right? It's this porn. It's this non-relational, somehow getting off at the click of a button, almost like we're lab rats now. So yeah, I agree. It's all bad.
Well, it comes down to self-regulation.
Right.
Self-regulation, and we want instant gratification. So, a combination of I want instant gratification right now to feel good. Marijuana is designed more for medicine. When they legalized it, it's to help people that have medical issues and they have cancer.
Well, most of the medical cannabis does not give you the high.
No, but now they've gone full spectrum the other way. That okay, awesome. Now it's legalized, which I think it should be. I think people should have a right to do what they want to do. But now you got the potheads walking around that they're driving down the street in the car smoking the weed, getting high in their car.
See, that's the exception, not the rule. It really is. It is the exception, because most people that are getting high, they ain't driving. They're munching. Or they got the headphones on. Or
But I'm
we
saying
did
that-
an interview with Tommy Chong on and everybody knows Tommy Chong
Right,
from
of
Cheech
course.
Chong, okay? Supposedly, the whole our concept of Tommy Chong is he's the biggest pothead in the world. You've seen him rolling those 29-inch circumference joints and stuff.
Yeah.
So it was interesting because he had pancreatic cancer or colon cancer or something like that, and he was saying that everybody in the world thinks I'm this huge pothead. He goes, hey, I'm a 1 or 2 toke guy. When the pain starts getting to me, I'll take 1 or 2 hits, and that's it. And then I'm done. And that is the majority of marijuana users or cannabis users, or especially in the medical side. So, and I mean, the reason that I know this and sound like I know more than I should is the show that we have here every week, the Nevada
Right.
Cannabis News Hour. And I mean, my first reaction a couple of years ago when I first started doing the show was, oh great, here's a bunch of fucking potheads. They're not. They are probably the most educated people I have ever come across. Their research is impeccable. The doctor we had on today, some of the research that he was talking about. So the one thing, I guess what I'm trying to say to
Right.
you, Joe, personally,
Yeah.
is that you have to be very, very careful in how you say what you're saying. And here's the reason. This was my first reaction to your comments. Okay, I suffer from PTSD.
Right.
It took almost 40 years for me to be, diagnosed with it. So I had it all my life. Didn't know. I just thought I was an asshole sometimes. So it's because of the training that you receive in the Marine Corps. Don't be a pussy, suck it up. So if you come across that way, there's a lot of things that you can't just suck up. You can't walk off or shake off depression or mental illness or anxiety. It, for whatever reason that it's been caused, whether it's conditioning because of the advertisers and the television that we watch 622 hours a week, or whatever. So we have created the society that we now exist in.
Right.
So how do we rise above that?
Okay, no, it's a good question. I love that. I think where the answer lies in some of the ways we're talking about it already. Like I would say, okay, so let's say the question is, what do you get when you add entitlement to lack of resilience and add some greed? You get an opioid epidemic. That's why we have that, in my opinion, and I can show you 1,000 stats to show that. Drugs are necessary for certain situations, no doubt, including marijuana, by the way. In terms of, if I had a choice between, if I was in a situation, let's say I had cancer or whatever, let's say I'm going to have chronic pain for the rest of my life. If I had the choice between an opioid and marijuana, I'm going with the marijuana. There's no doubt. It's so much safer. I mean, and that would be true. So I'm in. What I'm not in with is these very soft.
But 5 years ago, you couldn't have said that.
maybe not, because I was still on the thing of I don't think
I'm just using 5 years as an example, because the conditioning is that marijuana is bad, it's illegal, but your doctor's giving you an opioid and saying, here, this is what you need, take this.
Right.
So there's the cause of the fucking addiction. Is the medical field,
Yeah.
big pharma. They're the ones who have created the situation. And this doctor today was saying that 91% of people that have been treated for opioid overdosing are prescribed more opioids.
Right.
What the fuck is that? Sorry, never mind.
Well, and that's
I'm
what
done.
we talked about this morning, that from from that point down or up or however you want to look at it, there's too many people. It's like preventative care. Joe and I both, I'm going to get off the subject a minute. Preventative care, instead of doing preventative care with people and helping them be healthy minded and healthy with their bodies, giving those people a break on their insurance to say, hey, we're going to give you a thumbs up because you're eating right, you're working out, you're doing your thing. Let's help people be preventative. The pharmaceutical industry has basically said, no, we don't want to prevent. We're here to treat.
Hey, you'll do it for your car. You change the oil, you change the air filter, you get a tune-up, all that. That's preventative maintenance.
Right, and it's not.
But we won't do it for ourselves.
But it's not, and it's not up to the physicians either. This is the other point. I had this talk with somebody the other day. It's not up to your doctor to tell you how to eat and how to take care of yourself. We've got enough information now, enough internet, Google, that you can look things up on your own and know. We all know what's good for our bodies, and we all know what's bad for our bodies. And when you go to a doctor, and it's happened to me because I have neck problems, and my doctor wants to prescribe me 90 Flexerol, and I'm like, wait a minute, I don't. You know what? I don't need that many pills. Please don't. Writes a prescription anyway. The thing is there's nobody telling you, well, maybe you should go see a chiropractor. Maybe you should work out. Maybe you should rest. Maybe you're working out too much. Whatever it is. There's not enough preventative, and there's not enough education in this country. Or if there is enough education, people are still choosing to say, you know what? I'm going to take the drugs. I'm going to take the drugs. And then, of course, like you said, they OD. But the medical profession needs to be somewhat held accountable for that.
And they should, because they are getting points for the more prescriptions they write
go on
for certain
vacations.
medications.
They get cars.
Yeah.
They take care of their families.
You bet.
It goes down to the mental health. You have people being thrown out of mental health facilities because you don't have enough money to stay here. So they're legitimately putting people on the street that have mental disorders, or you have the enabling part of the mental disorder. We're going to keep you coming in, so we keep getting paid.
Where does a heroin addict, Joe? You should be able to answer this. Where does a heroin addict go to get clean if they have no money?
Probably just go to an emergency room.
And for how long? A couple hours?
Yeah, they could probably keep them
then they send them home?
72 hours.
Yeah.
And that's it.
And that's it.
Yeah. But, it's an interesting
Because
thing.
they don't have the money.
No, and that's... So let's take it from the top. I love the conversation about greed, right? Because you know how I am. Like, capitalism is the greatest thing on the earth. I get it, but... Listen, let's be honest. There's enough holes in it, more than Swiss cheese, about how bad capitalism can be when people are trying to be greedy. So we can talk all day about big pharma, who, listen, they should all be shot, okay? I mean, let's be honest. They're creating drugs, and then they're trying to make it like there's a market that you need all these opioids, and that's not true. So let's just, let's put them to the side. I could talk about that all day. Then you have they're putting commercials on TV to make regular people actually ask for these drugs, and they go to the doctors and they say, hey, how about this drug? But then we have these incredibly greedy doctors who actually write these prescriptions based upon the fact that their client or their patient saw a commercial on TV. Now, is that why you go to school for like 10, 12, 15 years? Is so your patient can tell you what kind of drug? So what's the difference between a doctor and your street drug dealer? There is no difference. I mean, you got to pay a copay. That's probably the only difference that I can see. So the doctors, we can lay a lot of blame on them, and I could talk about that for hours too. But then we have to talk about the soft human beings, right? Like in Japan, they don't they don't write prescriptions for opioids. You're lucky. I think that the law there, it's actually here too, by the way, you can't prescribe more than 3 days worth of opioids. So according to, I got my paperwork in here, 99% of doctors do not follow that law. So that's already a huge problem. In Japan, you can only get an opioid, I think, after a major surgery. And let's talk about the way we were raised, okay? I needed to have my hip replaced. Now, I walked on that hip for 5 years. I'd never used an opioid. Never. I had my appendix taken out. My appendix burst, actually. I didn't take any opioids for that either when I got out of the hospital. Now, let's be honest. I had some heroin while I was in the hospital in the form of morphine. You get that morphine drip. You press that button. But when I got out of the hospital, that garbage was over. So tell me what or why a 21, 22, anybody would go to a doctor, take time out of their day, miss work, to ask a doctor to get opioids for what? How much pain do you need to be in? Because I've had major surgery and didn't use opioids. So what's happening today is that everybody is so wimpy and soft and pussified that they're going to the doctor every time they get a hangnail, and then the doctor's stupid enough to write them a prescription for that. And that's really where the problem is. It's the supply and the demand, because the demand is so huge for drugs because people don't want to feel any pain. And I was never brought up like that. And even in the beginning when we played that George Carlin video, he was talking about how soft people are today. And it sounds mean and brutal to say that. But the actual fact is, the mean and brutal part is the thousands upon thousands of people who die every year, because the root cause of that is that they can't handle their emotional pain or physical pain for that matter. It's interesting, about 60,000 people last year died from heroin or an opioid overdose in 1 year. In all the years of the Vietnam War, we've had less people die. So there's more people dying of heroin and opioids in this country per year than died in all the years of U.S. occupation in Vietnam. Now, what gives? How wimpy do we have to be as a country?
I think that a lot of people now, and that's why you're seeing a lot of these people that are holistic. There's people out there that are trying to educate people in how to eat right, for diseases. I mean, we already know that a lot of the food out there causes inflammation and hardening of the arteries and all that. That I think that there has to be more of a proactive, because I don't think it's ever going to happen that you're going to get rid of all the drugs. It's too much money. There's too many people out there that benefit from having people screwed up.
Right, and
so
there's the greed.
I think what happens is that there has to be the other side of it that says, here's another alternative to your drug of choice. You could do the cannabis for pain, and there's creams, there's, you smoke it, whatever it is. And that's where the other side of it comes in, and people have to take a different approach to their pain or how they're coping. Another issue, like one of the reasons I want to set up my workshops too for women, is that this has happened to me. I could like to go see a counselor once in a while because I have a lot of stress in my life. I do the radio show, I do hair full time, and I listen to people in my chair all day long. I love my clients. I love every single person that sits in my chair, and I care about what I'm doing. So it would make sense that when they sit down and they're having a hardship, or I find out they're sick, things like that. I have to deal with being a professional, but also I'm a caring person. Then I train people. So I'm also involved in people's nutrition now, people's goals, working on their self-esteem and making them better. As a human being myself, I sometimes have a problem regulating all the stresses in my life and always having to be, okay every minute of my life. So I would like to go see a counselor, but guess what? I can't afford it. So there's a lot of people out there that would like to be able to talk to somebody or be able to just go vent, get all the crap off their chest that might be burdening them down or making them feel like they want to do drugs or get drunk just to check out temporarily. So that's another thing. And I think we need to see more. We're going to see more of these groups coming up, these workshops for people to get together, to vent, to share, to help share ideas of other ways that they can handle, everyday stressors. Mm-hmm. Because on the other side of it, on the medical side of it, unfortunately, if you don't have good insurance or you don't make enough money, you're left out, but yet the people that are out in society that are not doing the drugs, we're the ones dealing with the people doing the drugs and the stress from that, trying to get them better, plus live normal lives ourselves. So I think it's going to have to come from a more preventative angle where people are just going to say, we have this problem now, let's come over here and let's come in on this way. You know, the problems exist. We know that there's a bunch of drug addicts out there and alcoholics and whatever else they want to do. But now you got to have the people coming in on this side saying, okay, they're here, let's come in here. And I'm a big advocate for kids. I think that we need to start with the children. You know, start very low level because they grow up to be those adults.
Right. Yeah, I can give you the worst stories. I see these kids today, and one of the things I like to do is try to predict the future. I don't know why I like to do that. I like to figure this out before other people tell me what's going on in the world, and I can figure this out. I'm going to tell you a couple of things about this heroin epidemic is going to get worse, because I can tell you some of the people that I see when I do therapy. We're talking now anywhere between kids between 8 and 15 years old. You talk to them, they're all on either Ritalin or Adderall. Does ADHD exist? I'm not saying it doesn't, but the chances of it existing are very low. It's the same thing. It's like, I don't want to judge them too harshly. It's like, John, you were saying, I believe marijuana for medical purposes is a good thing. No doubt. It's positive. That's good. The problem is like, with that, what I have with marijuana is the same thing I have a problem with religion, okay? I might love Jesus, but I can't stand his fan base because they're all most of them are a bunch of idiots that don't even know what the Bible says, right? Can we say that? Okay, fair enough. The same thing with marijuana. I totally agree that there is some definite reason and purpose for it, and it might be the best option. The problem is, I don't like marijuana's fan base, okay? If you ever see a lineup of people outside, we were talking about, they look like a bunch of homeless people. Sorry, because I don't have anything against homeless people, but you can't tell me it doesn't affect them. There's a lineup of people, and I'm wondering where they're getting it. They all have cancer. They all have massive pain. I can tell you, I've got a torn Achilles tendon that I had to go through. No surgery, by the way. I never had the surgery on it. No surgery on my right or my left bicep, which I've torn both. I've got neck issues, a lower back issue. I don't take anything for pain. It's not that I'm so awesome. It's just that I had good parents at a good time when we used to raise strong human beings. It's not like every time I feel like a little bit of an ache, I'm trying to lie to a doctor to get medication. There are certain things that you should have medications for, no doubt, but the abuse is insane. And if anybody doesn't believe that, look at the numbers. More people die on heroin every year than do in the Vietnam War. And that's just opioids. We forgot alcohol still kills 33% more people than heroin did. And amphetamines are on the rise too. So the numbers will state or clearly show that people are abusing drugs. They're not using them correctly. Do you mind if I read this little thing here for you?
You can read it.
This is one of my favorite books.
Say something about the abuses, though.
Yeah.
How long have you had that book?
This is why I want you look at you, man. You are really jumping in. I love that. Okay. If we want to make this better, I think we have to start with the children. But how do we do that? We have to start with the correct parenting of the children. We have to teach them virtues, values, being honorable, these types of things.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second, because you just made me think of something. The thing is, when we said about being proactive with our children, the thing is there's so much emphasis, and I'm going to and this is going to sound really horrible what I'm going to say. So much emphasis on, there's a heroin epidemic, there's an alcohol epidemic, there's an obesity epidemic, there's all this stuff that we put so much, time and energy into. What are we going to do about the heroin epidemic? This is my answer to that. Nothing. I feel that people, if they're old enough, if they want to do a bunch of drugs and they OD or they end up doing something, what the other part of that is sometimes they end up doing something to other people, which is not good. My thing is you know what? It's going on. There's nothing we can do about it. You can't stop it. So now, again, what I said earlier, you go in and you go, you know what? Let's start educating these kids now. Let's make them a little bit stronger. Let's give them some coping techniques. Let's model for them as adults on that side of it. And I hate to say it, but all these people that are ODing, oh well, it's a waste. It's a waste of money for people. And every which way. I mean, and that's the other thing that cracks me up. Half of those people who do that, they have no money, but they have money to get pills, and they have money to go to therapists, and they have money to go, do whatever stupid stuff they do. And my thing is it sounds like I'm being very unempathetic, but it always seems to me that in our society, with whatever it is, we always tend to go, this is the problem right now. Let's take care of it. Well, that problem started way back here.
Right.
So forget about it. Let them OD. Do all the heroin you want to do. Smoke all the weed you want to smoke. But over here, let's take these children that are coming up in our world that have probably more stresses than we've had as kids, and let's teach them, at least educate them, so that when they come over here and they go, I think I want to do some drugs, at least they're educated and they're
Right.
taught some coping skills, and it's not your medicine.
All
See, I
right,
think-
but you have just forced me to ask an extremely critical question
Go ahead.
that you have to think about seriously. Who decides what the children get taught?
Parents.
That's not even, you can't even answer that question.
That's
Because if you are brought up Islamic, Hindu,
right.
Jewish, Catholic, Protestant, they all have their own ideas of what children should be taught.
True.
Hitler's brown shirts, that's what that was all about, indoctrinating the children.
Right.
And that's what you're talking about. You're talking about indoctrinating the children. However, to do that so that, what is the goal? What is
Right,
what is our goal?
Our goal
And
is to make-
who is going to decide who's the one? It's like you have different ideas of bringing up your children than
Right.
I do, or I did, or my neighbor, or whatever. We all decide this is what's best for my child, and we are all so full of shit. Our eyes are brown. But I'm just saying.
No, it's
if
a-
you,
it's
you
a
have
good-
to take it to that next step.
Yeah, it's a good point that you make. I mean, because we can't enforce a thing.
So when
that
did you get that
everybody-
book?
Yeah, don't worry. Keep reminding me. I'll get back to it. So it's a good point that you make, and it needs to be answered, right? So I think every society, we kind of have some basic mores, let's call it, and morals and values to get along in that society, whether we agree with them or not. But I think let's just take one of my friends, for example, because he was in on the show a little bit. He's like, good subject, I'm in. And what he offered me is that he's from Israel. And he said, okay, here's the thing. He employs many people. And I'm not going to tell you what business he does, because this is going to turn people off maybe. But he says if at any time he drug tested his employees, he knows that 90% of them would fail. So he doesn't do that, and he tries to give people second chances because he knows that a lot of kids are on drugs. So he just tries to help, and eventually down the road notices that, oh, by the way, if you come in on time all the time, you do your job, you get a raise. It might be better off that you're not on drugs, and he helps people this way. But his big point is that when you come from, we're suffering from comfortableness and affluence, according to him. Because when you have these rich kids, and let's be honest, this opioid epidemic and heroin epidemic is really hitting white suburbs. That's really why we're making a big issue out of this. Not me, but in this country, because it's hitting white people. That's why we're talking about it. What happens is you get your 18-year-old that's never had to work for anything and has rich parents that will tell you, oh, I have everything I ever wanted. I get to play video games all day. I get to have this refrigerator that's stuffed with food every day. What do they do when they're 18? They're hanging out doing drugs with their friends. You can be a stoner for a bunch of years and then wait a bunch of more years, hang on a little bit. Your parents die and you get like $1 million. So things are cool. But he was talking about being from Israel. As a male, you have 3 years in the military. That'll change your brain. If you're a woman, you get 2 years in the military. You're not going to get people in Israel having an opioid epidemic. So it gets a little bit strange because we can always throw in the Nazi thing about what do we do and how do we raise children. And I get that. That's definitely a serious subject. But I also feel that as a country, we have to stop talking about it being a drug problem, and we need to start talking about it being a human being and virtue problem at some point. Because now, for some reason, we want to throw out all morals in this country. And I don't even know if I'm saying it's moral. I think it's just about understanding personal responsibility and life. Here's one of my favorite books, and John already called me on this. You know I'm not lying, because this book is shredded into it just fell apart because I've been opening and closing it for like the last, I don't know, 30 years. But let me read this. This is one of the most amazing books ever written. It's called The Road Less Traveled by Dr. M. Scott Peck. Now, you don't have to read all this. Actually, I'll read just a little bit, but you only need to know 3 words. This whole book, the first 3 words of the book, he should have stopped right there. That's all you need to know. Ready? The chapter is called Problems and Pain. First 3 words. Life is difficult. Every other move beyond that, with your drugs and with your alcohol and with your porn and with your cupcakes and sugar and food, all of that is BS in life. You need to be able to accept your life and the fact that life is difficult. Enjoy it. That's the way it is. If we were talking about, let's go way back to like Seneca or like Alexander the Great, they basically said that life sucks. Be happy when things go good. You know, that's what the Stoic philosophers would say. So let me just read this. Life is difficult. This is a great truth, the greatest truth. It is a great truth because once we truly see this truth, we transcend it. Once we truly know that life is difficult, once we truly understand and truly accept that life is difficult, then life is no longer difficult. Because once you accept it, that the fact of life is difficult, it no longer matters. Because that's the state. Do you realize that when you're born, every minute you're alive, you're ticking, the clock is going 1 minute closer to your death? We're alive, knowing that we are born anxious. We are scared. When you say somebody says, I'm scared to death, you're scared to death and you're scared of death. And people that really throw themselves into religion and say it's going to be beautiful when I die, they're the most unconscious because they have no idea. When they tell people that they know when they don't know and there's no way to prove it, that means they're more scared of death than I am. And I know I'm scared because I don't want to die. I live in anxiety. But it's a natural state of a human being. Once you accept that, you love that. You're like, well, if you don't want to have anxiety, there's a word for that. It's called being dead. Now, you can be alive and be dead, be a zombie. That's called heroin addiction. Heroin addiction is like probably the most brutal because it's a sick feeling. Like if you see people that are on heroin, they're not having a good time. They're not enjoying themselves. They feel dope sick when they're not on heroin, so they need to get some. And they feel dope sick when they are taking it. So it's just this overall overriding thing of just feeling disgusting all the time, which is amazing because then the question becomes, how bad is your inner pain that you take something to make yourself sick? And that is preferable over your life of facing reality. I talked a little bit too much there. Go ahead.
I don't know what the answer is to all of it. I just know that there seems to be, it's always something, every time, the news gets a hold of something, there's always an epidemic of some kind. And I think people are just, for as smart as we're getting technologically, we're not really getting smarter when it comes to, human common sense or humanity or whatever it is. And I think we've realized raising the children the way that we have, I am from that generation, that now people have a chance to try to maybe make a shift in that, to say, well, we see what all the giving and the raising of soft generation's done. Maybe we need to go back to a little bit more of a not such an entitled, not giving our kids everything so soon and making them not have to work for things so soon, that it's just a given because you're so amazing, and the problem is too, this generation coming up, they think they're amazing, and you know what? They've been told that their first 18 years of their life, so why would you think anything different? It's no different.
Well, you're going to have to rework that when you realize that your life is not working.
If you were abused when you were younger, like you have the self-esteem issues that come along with that kind of entitlement thing too. It's not always the negative part that people say, well, how would you like to be raised in our generation when your parents were kind of hardcore and they were abusive at times? They could have been, and that
I can answer that.
That creates, but that also creates a certain sense of instability in people and low self-esteem also. So the part of raising the kids, now we know what that doesn't do. We know what abusing your kids won't do, and now we know what giving your kids too much can do, and it is doing. So now it's up to people to get smarter and say, well, where's the middle ground, so that we can raise strong individuals that can make good choices as adults, or the best choice they can for themselves, and not go with what the majority.
But see, that's an interesting thing you say. Like, okay, I'm going to answer part of that, right? Like, my parents were not good at being husband and wife. They would both admit that they were not good, but as parents they were both great, and they taught me at a very young age, right? Like, let's say I get into a fight and I go, mom, you got to help me. She's like, go fight your own battles. I wasn't going to die, what is a 6-year-old going to kill me? You're like, you so what happens is when you get older, what I see, I actually, let's say I'm doing therapy on a 15-year-old. I'm like, so what do you like to do? Nothing. Do you have any girlfriends? No. Why not? Well, I'm afraid to talk to anybody. Well, why? Because I don't. I get on the phone. The first thing these parents need to do, take the phones away. Okay, like I am an extremely shy human being, and if I had a phone when I was a kid, I wouldn't be able to talk right here, right now. Because I know I would have put myself in that phone because it was so hard to get over my anxiety and to be scared to do that. So that's some of the things that we need to do. We're too technologically advanced, but we're not psychologically or emotionally advanced.
But the other outside
either.
influences that come into parenting too. You were lucky. I was lucky, in my life too. But the other part that comes into, as John said earlier in the show, is there's so many external things that come into, when you're raising families and you're trying to do things as a parent. There's all the external things that come into that too. Their friends' parents, the visual things that the kids are fed.
Right. No,
all you need is a bad teacher in school, and that could flip a kid's brain.
Now it can. I don't think back then, not as much, because you were raised in a stable type of thing. Like, my parents sometimes may have been a little, by today's standards, a little too mean, but I knew I was loved. I knew I was cared about. They made structure. They didn't just treat me like some dog that was homeless, just throw him out and figure, whatever happens. I know we don't have a lot of time. Let me, full disclosure here. I also do some work with a particular company, and what they do is they do detoxes for people on heroin. And what it is they put them under anesthesia, and it's considered to be a very quick detox. They run all these chemicals through them. I don't know, I'm not the doctor, I don't know how they do that. But within a 4-hour procedure or so, when they get out and they wake up, technically they are detoxed. They don't have any heroin, opioid, nothing in them. They are clean. I'm not going to give any names here because I don't want to, hurt anybody in any way. But do you know what the success rate on that is that I've seen? The success rate is, I can count it on 2 fingers. John already did. He's not in the camera, so I'm going to do it. 0. You know why? Because addiction is not a disease. It's not the chemical. It's the inability to regulate your emotions and to deal with life. That's what it is. And because of that, they all of them relapse as soon as they get out. And you can't do anything about it. You can tackle them, you can take away their car, you can do anything you want. There's only one thing in this world they want, is to get themselves out of the world as it is. Half of them, when they wake up, they can't stand the fact that they woke up. They would rather be dead, but they're just too wimpy to go out the easy way, or the harder way, I should say. So let me say that, and we have just a little bit left. Let me say this too, because I want to make sure I'm very clear on this. You can look up these stats yourself. In 1998, from then to now, going by self-report studies, people are reporting a 500% increase in the amount of pain they feel. Do you think that's true? They're saying it's because they have the inability to be resilient to the pain. We're getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and then the doctors they wave the drug, and we snatch that drug. So the problem is systemic. It's from the human being, right from childbirth now, and the parents who are raising them, all the way through school, coddling these kids, and then we have doctors and big pharma contributing to it. So when we look at that, that's where the epidemic is. So I'm done with these documentaries saying that it's a heroin problem or an opioid problem. It's none of that. It's weak human beings that, until we get to the real basics of treating human beings on a heart and soul level, nothing good is going to happen. I don't want to be pessimistic, but that's kind of the way it is.
Or change the language. Instead of calling it disease, which you do, because I was looking things up for the show, they refer to heroin as a disease. Don't call it a disease. Say it's a mental disorder, and do that, because that's basically what it is. They kind of sugarcoat that too, to say, well, it's a disease, which is misleading.
Not a disease. It's not even actually addiction. It's chronic coddling. I need chronic comforting, which is normal for every person who has any kind of pain. I get that. So I guess we don't have any more time. We done? All right, perfect. This has been the Rise Above Show. I am Joe Perroni.
Wait.
Mancini.
No? Well,
I have
Dad.
one last thing to say.
Yes.
John.
I do have the answer to everything.
You gonna give it to us?
The answer is 42.
42. I didn't get that.
Then you have to read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Okay.
Oh my God, you keep telling us about that. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Is that a book or is that a movie?
Oh.
Both.
I wonder if it's on Netflix.
All right. I'll educate myself.
I gotta go. I'm gonna put it on my